She didn't even look up when she ended my career, just slid the termination papers across the desk like they were a lunch menu, fingers tapping the edge like she had a meeting to rush off to. My name wasn't even said out loud, just a soft sigh, a thin smile, and those 5 words. You've become too comfortable here. I remember wondering in that moment if she'd rehearsed that line in the mirror, the kind of line meant to sound visionary, disruptive, clean. My name is Michael Rourke. I'm 52 years old, and until 15 minutes ago, I was the Senior Vice President of Client Strategy at Marisol and Finch, a firm I helped grow from an underfunded logistics consultancy to a market leader with $280 million in recurring annual contracts. My division, my team, generated over 66% of the company's revenue stream last fiscal year. But apparently, in the new era of branding, buzz trumps loyalty. And legacy makes people nervous. I'd been called into the top floor conference room that morning under the pretense of a strategy alignment session. The invite came from Vanessa Gant, the new CEO brought in from a lifestyle tech company, known more for its TikToks than its profit margins. Everyone was still buzzing about her last product launch, a subscription box of curated candles and cloud-based affirmations. She's young, bold, fearless, the press had said. She's going to shake things up. They weren't wrong. The room was silent when I entered. No coffee, no slide deck, no casual small talk about quarterly goals or client feedback. Just Vanessa sitting alone at the head of the table with that soft-focused laptop and a signature pen lined up perfectly on a leather pad. She didn't even invite me to sit. "I'll make this quick," she said, and her voice had the faint, polished sharpness of someone who's coached for panels and keynotes. "You've become too comfortable in your ways, Michael. We need a fresh face who can ignite buzz on social. You've done good work, but it's time to make space." Just like that. No acknowledgement of the long weekends, the emergency flights to patch up client relations, the 3 back-to-back years we outperformed projections because I knew how to keep our biggest accounts close. She didn't even bother to pretend this was mutual. She slid the folder toward me like a passing thought. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked at her for a long moment, not in defiance, just observation. Her eyes never met mine. She was already refreshing a tab on her screen. I nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement that a line had been crossed and there was no going back. Then I extended my hand. She took it after a slight hesitation. Soft grip. The kind that's practiced, controlled. I smiled, a real one. The kind that unnerves people because it doesn't match the moment. I walked out. The silence in the hallway was thick. I passed desks that used to buzz with chatter when I walked by. This time, they hushed. A few glanced up. Some didn't dare. Others held eye contact just long enough to whisper a silent, "I'm sorry," with their brows. But no one spoke, not really. Elevator doors closed. I exhaled for the first time in 20 minutes. When I reached the parking garage, I sat in the car for a while with the engine off. I opened my laptop. There was one file, one legacy tool I'd built in the early days when Marisol and Finch was still running off spreadsheets and optimism. It wasn't part of any formal system. It was mine, a custom analytics engine that tracked client satisfaction trends down to sentiment, region, time of day, and sentiment lag versus invoice cycle. It's how I predicted when contracts would go cold before they actually did. I deleted it, not out of spite, but because it didn't belong to them. It never did. They never asked how it worked. They just benefited. I shut the laptop, pulled out of the garage, drove past the digital billboard on the corner, flashing Marisol and Finch's new branding campaign. Old structures, new vision. Vanessa's face was everywhere, smiling, minimalistic, futuristic. She looked like a TED Talk in human form. I drove past it without blinking. By the time I got home, my phone had already buzzed twice with vague checking-in messages from colleagues who didn't want to be seen publicly sympathizing. I didn't respond, not out of pride, out of clarity. This wasn't exile, it was a clearing. I poured a drink, sat on the balcony, watched the city flicker into evening, and somewhere deep in my gut, beneath the stunned silence, I felt something shift. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief. It was the realization that I didn't feel small. They'd made space, and I was going to use it. The first message came at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. What happened? No greeting. Just those two words, floating on the screen like a quiet knock at the door. I stared at it for a long moment, sitting in the glow of my home office, the light from the dual monitors casting a pale hue across the walls. 5 minutes later, another ping. You still in the game? This one from a vice president of procurement at one of our longest-standing accounts. We'd been through 4 product launches, 3 mergers, and 1 near disaster together. She wasn't the type to reach out unless something was wrong. I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. They already knew. The press releases about leadership evolution and visionary rebranding had done their job. Vanessa had wasted no time. My name was gone from the company site within 48 hours. In its place, a slideshow of vibrant buzzwords, digitally enhanced headshots, and a photo of Vanessa in front of a glowing wall of affirmation phrases like authentic disruption and courage through content. The truth was, I'd spent the last 7 nights doing very little sleeping and a lot of thinking. At first, it was the usual things, replaying the scene in that glass conference room, trying to find the moment I could have stopped it, could have seen it coming. Then the replays gave way to silence. And from the silence, something better emerged: clarity. I opened my laptop and pulled up the old client ledger, the one I kept for myself, not the official company CRM. It was simple: names, call notes, personal details, birthdays, kids' names, the kind of things algorithms never catch but always matter. Out of the top 20 accounts, 14 hadn't signed exclusive loyalty agreements. They stayed because I made sure they were heard. They stayed because I didn't make them scroll through GIFs and jargon to get a straight answer. I picked up the phone. First call was to Mason Hart. He was one of ours, had built out the Southeast distribution model with me a decade ago, and quietly disappeared after Vanessa's appointment. You heard? I asked. I heard, he said. I figured it was only a matter of time. Second call, Jun Park, former head of analytics, brilliant, unshakable, also conveniently laid off during the streamlining phase 2 weeks after me. I'm in, was all he said after I explained the idea. No company name yet, no office, just 3 people who knew how the machine worked because we'd built it. By Friday, we had a short list of 5 clients who had reached out, not officially, just quietly, testing the waters, wanting to know where we were, and more importantly, if they could follow without a press release. That same night, Vanessa launched her campaign. A glossy email blast hit inboxes with the subject line: Meet the future, buzz first, client-centric, socially amplified. It included a 3-minute video of her standing in front of a digital waterfall, talking about how branding is no longer about service, but about emotional velocity and story share saturation. I watched it with a glass of scotch and a raised eyebrow. There was no mention of client retention, no metrics about growth, no names or case studies, just mood lighting and motion graphics. Jun texted me mid-video. What the hell is emotional velocity? I replied, I think it's code for we stopped listening. They were throwing glitter at spreadsheets. The next day I called one of the clients who had messaged me. I just need to know, he said after the initial pleasantries. Are you still operating? Quietly even? We're not making noise, I said. We're making room. He paused. Then, good. I'm tired of influencers who don't understand supply chains. By the end of the week, we had 3 companies on retainer. Nothing public, just back-channel advisory. But it was enough. In a sea of synthetic enthusiasm, clients were craving something simple: results. That weekend, I cleared out the rest of my home office, took down the plaques and framed magazine features. I left one thing up, an old whiteboard with a faded quote from a former mentor. Buzz fades, value sticks. It felt more relevant than ever. I wasn't chasing revenge. I wasn't out to humiliate Vanessa or sabotage Marisol and Finch. But I wasn't going to let the narrative end with my silence either. I had something she didn't. I had proof. I was halfway through my second cup of black coffee at the corner cafe downtown when the call came through. Mike, the voice said, low but urgent. We're out, effective immediately. It was Jordan Gray from Halston International, our second largest client when I was still at Marisol and Finch. We'd worked together for 8 years, long-term logistics contracts, multi-continent fulfillment, razor-thin margins that only functioned because of trust and responsiveness. They weren't flashy, but they were rock solid. Vanessa had always treated them like dead weight. "What happened?" I asked, though I already knew. "They've got a 23-year-old account manager trying to pitch us market synergy through meme ecosystems. I didn't sign up to be a TikTok meme." I couldn't help but chuckle. "Have you spoken with anyone else?" I asked. "Two others. One's already got your number. The other asked for it." By the time I left the cafe, I had 3 more texts and a voicemail from former clients. No pleasantries, no small talk. Just variations of the same message. "If you're building something, I want in." I walked the 4 blocks to the temporary office space we'd rented. A co-working suite with questionable Wi-Fi and too many motivational posters. But it served its purpose. Mason and Jun were already there, hunched over a whiteboard scrawled with timelines and pricing models. I held up my phone. "It's starting." Mason glanced up. "Halston?" "Yeah, and McLean Group, possibly Rexton next." Jun nodded. "We're gonna need a server." We got to work. No press releases, no branded mugs, just a name, 3 Point West, and a mission. Client strategy with zero theater. We focused on process flow, margin clarity, operational feedback loops, the kind of things you can't build with emojis and Canva templates. We didn't post on social media. We didn't run ads. Our clients brought the others, whispered recommendations, screenshots of before and after results, case studies that spoke louder than any tagline. Meanwhile, back at Marisol and Finch, the buzz machine roared on. Vanessa had launched another campaign, this one a branded video series called The New Pulse. It was all voiceovers, slow zooms, and interns talking about how data could be sensational. I watched the first episode on mute. Even then it was too loud. Internally, I started hearing rumors. KPIs were peaking, at least on paper. LinkedIn impressions, webinar signups, shares. But the P and L sheets? Those told a quieter story. A former colleague sent me a screenshot of a Monday report Vanessa had presented to the board. The client retention chart had a noticeable cliff drop that began right around the day I walked out. She tried to win them back, of course. Vision decks, incentives, custom swag boxes with hand-stitched partnership slogans and QR codes that led to curated Spotify playlists. But trust, once broken, doesn't get rebuilt with playlists. I got another call, this time from a mid-tier client I hadn't heard from in over a year. "I was skeptical," he said. "I figured the company would evolve, but we haven't gotten a straight answer in weeks. You're not posting anything. You're just doing the work." "Exactly," I said. "This was never about a comeback. It's about continuity." 3 Point West didn't look like much. 4 desks, a shared mini fridge. Mason ran ops with the same grit he always had. Jun handled analytics like he was reading the future off coffee grounds. I led client strategy and account care. No gimmicks, no hype, just execution. We were small, fast, precise. The boutique firm no one saw coming. A journalist from a business publication reached out around that time. She wanted to profile us. Said there was a narrative arc. Betrayal, rebirth, redemption. Disruption from within, she called it. Wanted a photo of me looking out a window, preferably at dusk. I said no. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because we weren't a story. We were a solution. A quiet one. "This isn't about revenge," I told her. "It's about doing the work." She sounded disappointed but respectful. One night, after wrapping up a deck for a new account, I stayed in the office alone. It was nearly midnight. The city outside had quieted to a hum. I leaned back in the cheap leather chair and looked at the client board. 18 accounts, 12 of them from the top 50 I'd worked with at Marisol and Finch. All had come to me, not the other way around. I didn't poach, I didn't pitch. They called me first. That meant something. It meant that value still mattered more than buzz. It meant that relationships outlast campaigns. It meant that while Vanessa was still talking about platform synergy, we were busy making clients money. And for the first time since that cold, quiet morning in the glass conference room, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not pride, not ego, just peace. The ballroom was lit like a TED Talk. Purple uplighting, sleek white chairs, LED screens the size of billboards. I stood near the back, leaning against a column, arms folded. I wasn't on the guest list, but I didn't need to be. The Future Forward conference had open access after lunch. And besides, no one notices the quiet guy in a plain blazer who isn't live tweeting every slide. Vanessa took the stage exactly at 2 p.m., hair pinned sharp, her trademark minimalism perfectly intact. The screen behind her lit up in bold sans serif. Digitizing Legacy: How to Turn Old Structures into Scalable Buzz. I didn't flinch. I'd expected the title. The words legacy and buzz had become her favorite dance partners. I watched as she launched into a carefully rehearsed monologue about the modern client journey. She name-dropped influencers, quoted engagement statistics, threw up charts with phrases like virality velocity and user-activated pipelines. But here's what she didn't show: retention curves, client satisfaction deltas, contract renewal percentages. The room, filled with CMOs and innovation officers, clapped at the right times. But they weren't really watching her. They were watching each other, whispering. I heard my name twice before the 15-minute mark, and then came the moment that told me everything I needed to know. As Vanessa clicked to her next slide, a colorful map of global market conversation zones, the man sitting 2 rows ahead of me leaned sideways and showed his phone to a woman beside him. I saw it clearly. A screenshot of an internal memo. Subject line: Client churn, Q2, update, confidential. Body excerpt: Legacy division accounts have declined 66% in revenue over 90 days. Client satisfaction scores have dropped to 42%. Executive decision-making under review. I kept my face neutral, but something deep inside me exhaled. Someone had leaked it, and the timing wasn't an accident. By the time Vanessa wrapped her keynote, half the room had mentally checked out. They clapped politely. But the buzz, the real buzz, wasn't about her vision decks. It was about numbers no one could spin. I left before the Q&A. I didn't need to stay. The damage wasn't mine to manage anymore. 2 days later, I got a call from a friend still on the inside. He didn't give his name, didn't need to. They pulled her into a closed-door board session, he said. Investors are demanding an emergency review. That memo made rounds fast. What's she saying? I asked. She's blaming legacy systems, says she's still building momentum, but no one's buying it. Numbers don't lie, Mike, and they're pissed. That afternoon, my inbox started filling. You hiring? Still building something real. I should have left when you did. People I hadn't spoken to in months, some I barely knew, all of them looking for solid ground. It wasn't victory. Not exactly. But it was confirmation, quiet, undeniable confirmation that the work had always spoken louder than the noise. A reporter reached out, said she was doing a follow-up to Vanessa's Digitizing Legacy keynote, asked if I had a quote. I typed back, "No hard feelings, but there's a reason I never relied on hype." She responded with a thumbs-up emoji. I didn't reply. That night, I stayed late in the office. Mason was already gone, and Jun had taken his laptop home. The lights hummed quietly. Our little firm, 3 Point West, now had 11 active clients, 6 full-time employees, and 0 press coverage, just results. I pulled out the same notebook I'd been using since day one, scanned through the client notes, renewal metrics, feedback trends, all solid. We didn't have a PR team, we didn't do keynotes, but every one of our clients had renewed within 60 days. Not because we dazzled them, because we didn't let them down. I opened the window and let the city air in. There was a strange stillness to it all, a kind of calm that only comes after months of noise. I knew Vanessa would fight to recover. She was sharp, ruthless even. But she'd burned something you can't buy back: trust. You can't digitize legacy if you don't understand how it was earned. I sat at my desk, the city moving beneath me, and I realized something. This wasn't just about proving her wrong. It was about proving that doing the right thing the right way still matters, and that no amount of spin can compete with what clients whisper to each other when no one's watching. The sunlight hit my office wall in a perfect stripe, soft and gold, like it had been poured through a thin slit in the sky. It moved slowly across the floor as the morning settled in, warming the wood beneath my desk and softening the hum of conversation just outside my door. I could hear them, my team, leaning over laptops, trading thoughts, editing decks, running numbers. Nothing flashy, just people doing honest, excellent work. We'd just signed another account, a big one of Marisol and Finch's original tentpoles. The defection hadn't come with drama or headlines, just a quiet transfer of files, a new retainer agreement, and a short note from their COO. "We trust you to deliver, like you always have." I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile, not outwardly. But inside, something clicked into place, a gear returning to its proper track. Across the room, Jun was sketching out performance models on the glass wall with a dry erase marker, his face half lit by the sun. Mason was on a client call in the corner, pacing like he always did when he was in the zone, measured, confident, completely himself again. I stepped out of my office for a moment and walked the floor. Not a big space, just 3 private offices and an open layout. One long table that served as both a conference area and lunch bench. There was a worn espresso machine in the kitchenette that hissed more than it brewed, but we all swore it made the best coffee in the city. Clara, one of our newer analysts, was frowning at her laptop. I leaned over her shoulder. "Need another set of eyes?" I asked. She nodded without hesitation. "I think I'm overselling here. I want the numbers to speak, but it's feeling overdone." I skimmed the deck. Clean layout, sharp visuals. A few slides leaned a little too heavy on adjectives. "Cut this section in half," I said, pointing. "Keep the case study and drop the buzzwords. If the numbers are right, they don't need dressing up." She smiled. "Got it." It was a small exchange, a moment of mentorship, but it meant everything to me. This was why I built 3 Point West. Not just to prove something, but to pass something on. Not hype, legacy. Back in my office, I caught a glimpse of the muted television mounted on the far wall. A business segment was running, some finance network I never watched. The ticker slid by slowly, one headline at a time. Marisol and Finch, CEO under review following revenue collapse. I didn't flinch, didn't pause the screen. I just watched the words roll by and fade off to the side. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. I stared at it for a beat. Then I let it ring. Voicemail picked up. No message left. I didn't need one. Vanessa hadn't called to apologize. That much I knew. She'd called because the numbers no longer bent in her favor. Because performance is immune to branding. Because eventually, even the best designed illusion runs out of runway. I closed the door gently behind me and sat at my desk. There, in the top drawer, was an old notebook. The cover was frayed, corners curling slightly. Written in faded marker across the front. Retention Tactics, 2013. I ran my hand over it. I'd carried that book for a decade, from coffee meetings to boardrooms, through late-night strategy sessions and pitch rehearsals. It was filled with the small things that held big clients, follow-up questions, personalized KPIs, handwritten thank you notes, conflict patterns, negotiation models. Things no algorithm ever quite understood. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I set it aside. Next to it was a new notebook, clean, bound in soft navy leather, a single line written on the cover in fresh ink, "Next chapter." I opened it to a blank page. Outside my window, the city moved quietly. No flashing billboards, no corporate hype videos. Just the rhythm of people doing what they do. Walking, building, starting again. And in this little office above the noise, I finally understood something I hadn't been able to articulate until now. They didn't fire me because I was irrelevant. They fired me because they didn't understand that what looks comfortable is often what makes things work. That reliability isn't the opposite of innovation. It's the soil it grows from. That trust doesn't need a campaign. It needs presence. As I picked up my pen and wrote the first line of a new strategy plan, I felt no bitterness, no urgency to prove anything anymore. Just the steady pulse of a team I trusted and a future that no longer needed to be loud to be real. Turns out comfort wasn't the enemy. It was the foundation they never understood.